Welcome to the Full Press Fantasy Pod, part of Full Press Coverage. My name is Kyle Senra, and joining me is my co-host Brad Harbin. How you doing, Brad?
Hey, what's up, Kyle? Once again, always puts a smile on my face when I hear that intro from you. But yeah, man, I'm doing good. How about yourself, man?
I'm talking about smiles; they're contagious, and that's putting a smile on my face. Happy
Absolutely.
to be here. Happy to have a new guest to the show, and it's actually going to be quite a departure from what we typically talk about. If we've had any guests come on, it'll be a lot of times members of our FPC Dynasty League, but if it's not people, league mates specifically from that league, or other people with fantasy football experience. But now we're going something completely different. Someone I've podcasted with before in different contexts. But TJ McKinley is here to join us today as someone who's never played fantasy football. So TJ, welcome to the Full Press Fantasy Pod, right in your element.
Hello, Kyle. How you doing? Glad to be on.
Yeah, glad to have you on. And when you had approached and asked if you'd wanted to link up, do some podcasts together, I thought, okay, yeah, there's no way we'd get him on the fantasy pod, right? If he doesn't play fantasy. But then that got me thinking, although, is that the perfect guest to have on to kick off redraft season? So the typical,
For sure.
I would say, most common form of fantasy football, our season of single season fantasy football. And that's kind of where a lot of people start. So TJ, you've approached us. You created a bunch of questions about fantasy football that Brad and I are just going to answer through, talk about our experiences in fantasy football. For the listeners, maybe they have their own answers to some of these questions too. And we can encourage them to reach out to us,
sure.
DM us at Center Says, at FPC_fantasy pod, at the rundown_BH for podcast, the co-hosts here. But yeah, TJ, I guess I ask you how you're going, and that'll basically be the last question I ask because it's the episode of your questions. But how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm just ready to get started, get these questions out the way, learn some experience about fantasy draft today.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, there might be some things we talk about here that will help some people who aren't as familiar with fantasy football or have, but haven't thought of certain concepts. So yeah, let's. I'm excited to get to this.
So to start off with, my first question is, what first made you want to start playing fantasy football, and how were your early successes and failures?
Brad, you want to
Sure,
kick this off to start? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and answer this. And the truth is, TJ, I have a little bit of a riverboat gambler in my bloodstream. So I like to. I mean, I certainly don't have a problem. I mean, that's a different podcast somewhere else, I'm sure. But I do like to kind of roll the dice a little bit. And I mean, I grew up watching football. Felt like I kind of knew the teams and in the progress, but I did definitely some of my shortcomings were not following some of the settings, like as far as yards per catch or yards per rush, and whether the quarterback only gets 4 points for a touchdown as opposed to 6. I mean, like when I first started, everybody got 6. That's kind of how old I am. It's back in the day. Everybody got 6 points, and it was just a big scoring fest. But as fantasy football really evolved, they kind of changed a lot of the settings and the scoring options. I mean, you can get an extra point or a half point per reception, maybe even if it's from your tight end kind of thing. So some of my shortcomings or failures definitely early on is not looking at the settings and just being excited about drafting and stuff like that. But the settings really can dictate, kind of the ways that you go with making choices, especially kind of like middle of the rounds.
Good point. Always know the rules, right? That's the first step of any strategy talk is always get into the league, figure out all the rules of the league. How are points scored? Figure out what do you have to do, what you need each week. I kind of like details and oriented towards that. So that I always felt I got a grasp on it. It's funny. What really drew me to play fantasy football was actually the show The League. And which is a show about people in a fantasy football league. It's a sitcom situational comedy show, and they're pretty can get pretty outrageous. And there really isn't too much of the episodes that are concentrated on fantasy football. It's the hijinks of their lives, but it got the conversation rolling. And then I remember 2012 was the first year I got into fantasy football, and I was working at a golf course at the time, working golf course maintenance. And I remember after a weekend shift, we went out for breakfast afterwards, and we were talking. And then a couple of my coworkers, they had played fantasy football, and they were talking about. I think we were talking about the league, to be honest, the TV show, and then they mentioned they're interested in starting up another fantasy football league. So I joined one there, and also that same summer though, people I was in at university with in the same residence, same dormitories, they were also starting a fantasy football league. So I had also received a text from them. So that first year, 2012, I played in 2 leagues, and talk about early successes and failures. I got to the semifinals in both. So but teams were decently drafted, and I did well enough in season to keep adding players, trying to start sit decisions. And got to the finals in one of them. Actually, it didn't took me, I think, until year 3 before I actually won a league. But the early success was okay. I can do this, and I can keep up, and I can do pretty well at this. So that was what kicked it all off for me.
Yeah, probably the biggest hiccup I had for me in one of the first leagues I joined. So I guess my first league went all the way back to, I want to say, I'm trying to think, like 98 maybe, on NFL.com, and it's a league that's actually still kind of still around. And it's a keeper league. You get to keep a couple players and stuff like that. And but in that league. Once again, like I said, not really paying attention to settings, or I don't know what I was thinking, but I remember taking Brett Favre and Dante Culpepper back to back in rounds, and it was only one quarterback. And I thought, and I was exuberant. I was so happy I had both of them. I was like, oh no, I can only play one. So that was a big maybe too many beers or something back in the day or something when the draft was going on. But that was definitely an oops moment that I clearly remember to this day.
I will say sorry, TJ, real quick. My worst season in fantasy football was 2013, my second year. And I think what I did was I had so much early success that what happened in 2012? And I figured some things out specifically for 2012 and went just off that for 2013, last year's results. And I realized, there's also made some bad trades that year. Learned a lot about having to trade, but yeah. So early successes and failures probably happened in those first 2-3 years for me. Learned a lot. Still learning. Sorry, TJ, but go ahead.
So, with all y'all experience, since y'all seem like y'all vets in the fantasy world, for a newcomer, would y'all recommend them play fantasy, or would you recommend that they wait out, get learn what is all to play fantasy? Somebody who a newcomer to it.
Yeah, I recommend fantasy football to everyone. It's super fun.
Absolutely.
Now, no, it might not be fun for everyone. I understand that, right? Like different people have different ways of having fun. So I guess to the people I'd be speaking to, like people who are football fans but haven't played fantasy football, it allows you to invest into the players themselves. The yards the players are gaining or the touchdowns they scored, you benefit from them from your team. So it like enhances the experience watching. A lot of people I know in the fantasy football community have been watching football their whole lives, but they know much more about football because of fantasy football, because it's forcing them to research things and concepts as opposed to, just watching Sundays and then the rest of your week isn't necessarily centered around football. Fantasy football kind of gives you that element that you're in the game. You've got, a lot of, enough leagues where it costs money to join. You've got actual skin in the game, and something to play for. The idea is people who love games and love just whether it's board games or video games, like strategy, the idea of exactly, crafting a strategy, trying to solve problems. It's super fun for that, and to try and win and beat a lot of cases are some of your best friends. That's also fun too, the competitive aspect. So, I know it's not for everyone, but I do recommend it for everyone to at least give it a try and see if it is your thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I spoke about this. I guess for a while now, but last year we even my family put together a league, and there's like 11 and 12-year-old boys in there that first time ever joining a league. There was no money involved, just kind of bragging rights, but to get them involved and have them ask questions and stuff like that was really cool. So, but one thing that is unique with fantasy football and the NFL in general is that everything is, at your fingertips now. Who's injured, who got injured at the practice on Tuesday, and are they questionable for Saturday or Sunday, and it's just the constant knowledge, which that can it can be a little overwhelming, especially if you have the 27, 32 teams like some of our previous guests have. But all in all, I mean, if it's something it definitely will get you into the sport a little bit more. For me, another aspect besides the little bit of riverboat gambler in me is it's just I mean, I love to coach, whether it's football, basketball, or baseball, and it's kind of like a way of coaching. I mean, you're manipulating the lineup against your opponent that week, and I think that kind of drives me as well.
Actually, Brad, that's a good point. That makes me think of another comment I've heard from people is they wanted to play fantasy football because they liked franchise mode on Madden, or I think it's called Dynasty mode actually in the NHL games. I think franchise or dynasty mode in like the NBA games too. So people who love not just playing the game themselves, but the team building part of those video games, you get that in fantasy football, but you also get to do it not just against the computer, but other people. Now, I guess a lot of those video games now, the advent of the internet is that you can do those franchise modes and compete against other people online. But I also think online is what makes fantasy football so accessible. Brad, I guess 1998, were you playing long enough where you had to call in the lineup where everything was done manually, all the scoring, or did you have access to the internet for
Yeah. We still had we had access to the internet but it's certainly not as fast as it is these days.
No.
You would be sweating out on Sunday, like, oh my gosh, did the pick get in, or did I switch the right guy and stuff like that. But
it's made it that a lot more people can join now. Like that barrier of I could actually see my lineup. I don't have to several days before call in to a radio station to have them set my lineup or have to track it all through a newspaper. Like that's also made it, I think, easier and more accessible.
Sure, absolutely.
So I heard, Brad, you earlier mentioned, I say back in '98, you used NFL.com for fantasy. So for both of y'all, what are the first websites, or what are the websites or apps that you use for fantasy football?
Well, it's funny. My first year, I mentioned I played actually on two different leagues. The two different leagues I was in were on two different platforms. So my first experience was okay. I actually had to already learn two different systems right from the get go. So it made it so that I don't mind playing on different systems. But yeah, NFL.com was one of my first ones, and Yahoo was actually the other one. I will say that NFL.com league that founded in 2012 still does exist to this day. So it is my oldest league. Still trying to win that one. Still haven't won that one. But yeah, those would be the first two sites I played on. How about you, Brad? Was NFL.com the only one for a while, or?
Yeah, NFL.com, and then I guess Yahoo was probably when Yahoo started going. Yeah, Yahoo was before ESPN for me. So yeah, it's basically been NFL.com, Yahoo, ESPN Fantasy, which is pretty good. I mean, you get some good information there. You get lots of reports from the different ESPN guys, and it's pretty easy to maneuver around. And then of course the latest craze I think is Sleeper, which I didn't know anything about until I started being a guest host on this show with Kyle, and ended up joining the league, and so now I have about eight teams on that league. Whoops.
Yeah, another Sleeper. That's also, it seems like that's helped create a more expansion of fantasy football managers. A lot more people are coming to fantasy football because of Sleeper. The other side I've also played on is called Fantrax, but those are the four you mentioned, and those five really are the main ones I've played anyway on for single season formats. The main, again, format of fantasy football we call redraft, which is you draft a team typically in August or even September. Every year you play the season, and then the league's over. The next year you come back. I mean, if the league still exists, you come back next year and you redraft a whole new team. Hence the term redraft. I got to say, Sleeper does seem to be the most popular now, but of course, everyone probably knows the website ESPN the most, so that might still be among the more popular ones. I don't know what your opinion is on the best of those, Brad, because I actually have a clear opinion that I think is I don't hear that often, but I actually think Yahoo is the best of those for redraft specifically.
Interesting. I don't know if I feel like I navigate very easily around ESPN because once that came out, I mean that was certainly the craze to kind of bounce around there. Um, so I kind of lean ESPN just because I know I know how to navigate around. Not necessarily, I guess, the content. The content's all pretty equal from what I can tell. ESPN seems to be a little more up to date, or at least from what I've seen. Like, I mean, you can get kind of up to the minute, injury report, which Yahoo seems to be just a little bit behind. But that's kind of pulling hairs or whatever.
I
Splitting
will
hairs.
say I'm probably not getting my injury reports from the fantasy sites. I'm going to like
Yeah,
RotoWire and
sure.
like
Okay,
trying to get my injury reports from there and not from each platform
fair
itself.
enough.
I know the one thing that I've found with Yahoo is they give you a ton of stuff. So when you go to your main spot after you draft your team, when you set your lineup, like they give you a lot of information. You don't have to like search on a menu just to find out how many targets a player has. The game logs are fairly detailed. I like
Yeah, yeah,
the when you go to look at fantasy points against, like the defenses that are allowing most fantasy points to positions, part of the research of what are good matchups. On Yahoo's, you can go look and you can look on the week to week game log for those defenses as well to see, okay, were they spiked by touchdowns, or like, oh, some random guy got a touchdown, but the main running back they held, like you can look at all those details instead of just the total points. But I think the best thing about Yahoo is when you go to the players not on teams, the players that aren't drafted by other managers or on your own team, the free agents in the league, you can actually sort the free agent settings
right.
by NFL team. And I actually don't know any other platform that'll let you do that. MFL actually will. So for all the people that love to dump on MFL, we'll get to that in a second. But if I was recommending any site for anyone to use
To start up, yeah, for sure.
first time fantasy football, I would say Yahoo because I think it gives the most
Agreed.
information and it's the best way to easily see everything and easily organize it. All the draft rooms are pretty much really similar. There's not much difference in terms of what you see when you're drafting. So Yahoo's mine. But then again, when you get to dynasty formats, okay, you keep your team every year. Like you have one startup draft, then you just hold the team the rest of the year. You just have rookie drafts. My Fantasy League, MFL, or Reality Sports Online, RSO are the two. Sleeper's also pretty good for the redraft specific ones you mentioned. They probably have the best dynasty format. In fact, some of them might not. Those other ones you mentioned might not even have dynasty, but
Right.
MFL, RSO, that gets into some really specific. I mean, Reality Sports Online, that's salary cap contract. That's their own unique format. So it's that can get really specific and really deep. But yeah, Yahoo and Sleeper seem to be the two you'd probably most recommend to people.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
let's say I'm a new user, and let's say I get on Yahoo Sleeper. Let's say I were to join a good league. Let's say it's a league, fantasy has a league. Let's say I join a league that's good. What would be the benefits of me joining one?
Oh well, I mean, getting to play fantasy football is of course the main benefits. But yeah, I think it's the way you pose the question, benefits of being in a good league, and that's where knowing who your commissioner is might be the most important thing, right? So because you could go on most of those platforms and just join a random league right now as you're speaking, but you also don't necessarily know who those other people are, just people that you met on the site. So I would say the best thing is to almost have a core set of people, maybe not everyone to fill the league immediately, but enough of a core group of people that will be in the league together as friends. So TJ, like specifically for you, if you're looking to get into your first fantasy league, regardless of the platform, finding the right people is a huge thing. And like who's, if is there someone with experience that could be the league commissioner and set that up and organize that. So like specifically TJ, I would say the first step for you is like, do any of your friends want to play fantasy football? And like that would be the core group of people that would that will make the league great. Because the benefit of a great league is the interactions you get with the people. In addition to playing fantasy football itself, the whether you're all drafting together or not in the same room, the interactions trading wise, the head-to-head matchups you have each week.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think the main benefit is these social interactions. Fantasy football is just another way to all game together in a sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't really have too much to add, I will say to kind of go back to the Yahoo leagues, there is opportunity to just join a random league that Yahoo will put together for you, and you can pick I guess your beginner, intermediate, or advanced kind of style. I don't know if that's exactly what it says. It's been a while, but you can certainly go in there and they really help you out with a draft. I mean, with all the details and stuff like that. So, but yeah, to echo what Kyle said, it's definitely good to have some buddies in a league, some people who who will stick with it, and not just if they start off 0-4, they just stop paying attention, and that's no fun. Certainly no fun for him, and it's no fun for anybody else because kind of takes away trading opportunities, and really just kind of it causes trouble in the league, with matchups and stuff if you're playing that guy and he's not paying attention. So yeah, I mean, definitely you want to have a good group of guys that are willing to get involved every week.
There's one thing that just wanted to touch on quickly here, Brad, before we go any further. And we talked about Yahoo and Yahoo's and ESPN, I suppose. Not so much NFL.com. It kind of goes against their brand, but you can also do other sports as well.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you've had any experience with those sites on or with different sports and if they function better than others, or is fantasy football you're just a purist? That's all you've ever done fantasy?
Me, no, I definitely have been have done baseball, fantasy baseball for a while now. Even
That's true. I knew that. I don't know.
Even before computers. I mean, there were drafts where, and God bless the commissioner because he would go through and tally up all the scores every single week and shoot them out to us. But I mean, I would get the newspaper and look at the box scores and see how my guys are doing and stuff like that. Not as much trading and stuff back then, but fast forward, still do fantasy baseball through ESPN and Yahoo. I for that one, I do prefer the Yahoo platform. That one's a little bit more easier to navigate and figure out who's pitching and stuff. Where ESPN's a little more difficult but yeah, so it's really those. I have tried NBA before, fantasy NBA on Yahoo, but I probably did a couple seasons of that back when I was actually had time to pay attention. But yeah, that's about it.
So was baseball your first? Because you mentioned you did that.
Yeah, baseball was the first. Yeah, it was senior year in high school, which was a long time ago. So yeah,
I was. Well, it's funny because my parents, we used to do hockey. Fantasy hockey was actually how I started. Of course, the Canadian would start with hockey.
Yeah,
and we would do just playoff pools for the playoff, I should say, picking players. Okay. Going into the playoffs, and that was a fun bit of strategy because you just go with the best scoring players, but if their teams get eliminated in the first round, you might not go as far. So the balance of which teams you think will go far versus which players will score the most points. So, and I remember, I think as far back as 1997, 98, 99. So I would have been 7, 8 years old playing fantasy. So did that, mostly just that for a while before ultimately getting into fantasy football, like I said, in 2012. But I also did regular season fantasy hockey for a year, also on Yahoo, and it worked well. The site was fine, but man, that's a grind. In the basketball and baseball, all those games.
Baseball is definitely
football. It's nice and manageable because it is only 17 weeks maximum. Hopefully 17 weeks. That means you're going to the championship. But yeah, it's as much as I love the hockey stuff, I fantasy football is the best. Would you agree there, Brad?
Yeah, definitely the easiest to keep track of and stuff like that. I mean, they are making it more difficult having games on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays but yeah, definitely compared to baseball where you have to really keep track
every Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. There's half the league playing. Yeah, no. Yeah. So yeah, of all the sports, fantasy football is the best. We want it anyway.
To go ahead, I'm gonna go to this question. Since we in the off season football and basketball, how hard is it to draft the right players for the upcoming season? How much research and time and effort does it take to make sure that you drafting the right players?
Well, I mean, in theory, you could go with zero research and just go because the one thing with all these fantasy websites will do is they'll have a list of average draft position for the players on their specific platform. So you could, in theory, just go in, build the team how you want position wise, just going based off the ADP, the average draft position. So you could, in theory, put zero effort into it in terms of like research before the draft. If you have, okay, I've got like roster construction principles, like I want to build a team with this many players, this position, this many here, and kind of figure out rounds you in theory like to go, and you could use the ADP for that. But like if you could go so little into actually looking at individual players and just kind of I'm going to go with the average draft position. I'll let the intelligence of the crowd, I'll let kind of how common players are drafted where be the guide to which value players I should take. So you could, in theory, go with like very little research on players, or you could do what a lot of us on podcasts do and research a ton of it. So I know one thing we've done on the podcast here, TJ, every year, whether it's Brad, myself, or co-hosts of the past, is every year we'll do position tiers. We'll kind of go through and look just each position, kind of group them not just into flat rankings, but also grouping into tiers and say, okay, where would we want to prioritize? And the idea I've always said to that is if you get to a certain point in the draft, it's okay, I have one player in this running back tier, but 5 in this wide receiver tier. I'll probably take this one running back here, and then in the next round, maybe one of those 5 receivers falls to me, and that's the best way to maximize getting both. But the idea really is fantasy points, right? I think that's what we're chasing, and then players get fantasy points based on yards, touchdowns, receptions. Other leagues you can have like first downs and carries and other components of it. But with yards, receptions, and touchdowns, you're basically trying to figure out like those are the things that translate. So essentially you want to figure out what players will score the most fantasy points, which is how do you go and project that we are like week to week game that's so much variability week to week before the season. So to be honest, TJ, it is very difficult. And most of the time, your draft isn't going to win you your league. You could really like set yourself super back if you draft really poorly or you just have bad luck with injuries. But typically the teams that win draft at least decently, but also keep adding and making the team better as the season goes on. So, if you feel like you have a bad draft, you have all season to fix it, adding players, trying to make trades. And that's where the whole knowledge, like every week, there's typically going to be a waiver wire period in these leagues. And so that's a super huge component. All the players that are available, who gets to prioritize who gets who. Some leagues that it's just there's a rolling waiver order or it's reverse the standings. Other league there's actually dollar amounts that you'll bid, free agent auction bidding or fab bidding. So that's kind of really the secret of where your team wins. So yeah, it can be very difficult going into a draft or where a season happens to know exactly how that season's going to look. But it's also, while it is the way you start your team, your draft isn't the final look of what your team's going to be at the end of the season also.
For sure. And also, I mean, most of these sites, as Kyle mentioned, that they do have the ADP rankings and everything, but maybe you're hung up on a position and you're trying to decide between 3 players. Typically, you can just hover over those players and they're going to give you what they did last year and what's projected this year. And that can, kind of maybe sway you one way or another if you're trying to figure out between, I don't know, DK Metcalf and Terry McLaurin, or I don't know, just it could help you kind of sway. Also, some of these sites, you can do mock drafts, just like the real NFL. I mean,
how common are mock drafts for like the real NFL community before the NFL draft happens? Yeah, you can certainly do that for your fantasy leagues where you can practice going through. Some will even tailor to your roster settings in your league, and you can simulate a draft with computers. I mean, sometimes you can join mock drafts with other humans too and see how humans draft. Yeah, good point, Brad.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing I would add is that, selfishly, I'd say, listen for those if we have new listeners here from this episode, for instance, listen to the podcast. This is actually the best time of year for that because now we'll really get into our, projecting how the season's going to go, and so the process always tries to move forward every year. A new component I'm going to add, and this will be the next 2 episodes. I'm trying to project player target share, specifically at the wide receiver and tight end spots, partially as a way to help myself get better at ranking wide receivers. So people kind of get a look in these next 2 episodes after this of how we think the targets are going to go and be distributed, which players expect to get the highest target shares. My first year doing this type of project, I've been doing touchdown projections the last couple of years, so now I feel like these two together will give me a good floor and also ceiling approach to these players. So hopefully that helps me get better at ranking wide receivers. Because yeah, we're always trying to get better. We're always trying to learn every year. So there's some things we're going to be doing here, talking projections, talking our tiers all through the next couple of months. So that's how we approach it and how we're going to help ourselves, and then we can share with listeners and hopefully help them as well.
Not to get into anybody's pockets. How does the money how do you earn money on fantasy? Like I see, I did a little research. You get fantasy points, but how does the points play to your earnings?
Well, and that'll be like really dependent on what type of fantasy you're looking for. Because the one thing is, I think I already referenced this, but I'll repeat it again. You could play fantasy football for free, like so. A lot of these sites there are no league fees, so literally there could be in fact zero cost associated. It costs nothing to play, and you still get especially if you're really competitive and the idea of winning is more important than the money you're getting. You'll kind of love that idea of not having these constraints attached to it with the money, and I just want to win, baby. So regardless of what the payout is. So first off, you could in theory just play for zero, and it's still a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So how a league will typically work? Again, you'll gather groups of people. A lot of league sizes is 12 teams. 10 is also pretty common. I've seen leagues operate with 8 teams, and it works fine. But however many people you have in the league, everyone puts in a league entry fee, and that could be as little as $5 or as much as, I mean, Brad, I listen to podcasts. They talk about some high stakes leagues where the entry fee is like 4 figures. Like you're putting in $1,200 to the league pot, and then typically, I mean, so especially those bigger leagues, they might actually have a league fee associated. So not all the money goes back to everyone else, but assuming that's not the case, let's say it's a 12-team league, everyone puts in, let's just say $100 just to round it out. That's $1,200 there for the people who win. So typically what will happen in a fantasy football season, you'll go play everyone in your league at least once. Certainly from week 1 through week 14 is typically what we'll see now. So in a 12-team league, there'd be the 11 other managers you play once, and then I guess 3 other people you'd play twice. So a quarter of the league you'd play twice against them. And then that's where the playoffs will then start. Typically, the 6 best records. I mean, 12 team will say it's half the league. 6 make the playoffs, 6 don't. But however many teams make the playoffs, you typically through week 15 through 17 is the playoff matchups, and whoever wins at the end will typically get the most money, maybe all the money. I've seen leagues where it's literally just winner take all.
Right.
Most leagues I've been in, though, that like second place and first even and third place will get some money. Typically, third place, you'll get your money back. So whatever the entry fee is, you'll just get it back. Maybe second place is double the entry fee or a little more, and then all the rest goes to the winners. Typically what I've seen. To be fair, though, there are some other leagues I've seen where there's a certain percentage that goes to league winners. Some more might go to who are the highest scoring teams in terms of total points at the end of the regular season. They might get something. Or there's even some leagues with weekly prizes. The highest scoring team each week will get a certain amount of money. Maybe it's just whatever the entry fee is or half the entry fee. So you've got chances to win during the weeks, and then whoever wins the league at the end of the year also gets money for that too. So there can be different ways. There are sites that exist now. Like if anyone did want to do a money league, what I would actually recommend doing, there is a slight site fee on it, but it's secure. It gives like a sense of security for the money. It's a site called League Safe, where basically everyone joins, and you don't even pay the commissioner directly. The commissioner and everyone else will pay the site directly. The site kind of holds it in there, again, League Safe, and keeps the money safe. And then when the league wins, the league ends and the winners are announced, then the commissioner just has to kind of designate who the league winners are, and they'll get paid out into their accounts like that. League Safe seems to be the best way, as opposed to having the commissioner handle the money, especially if you don't know them. Are they going to hold it? And there have been some complicated things. So typically that's how money will be made, and it's usually pretty seamless on League Safe. As soon as the commission is ready to pay everyone out, it'll almost be instantaneous in the account. Now, the one thing I will say, TJ, there's a whole different format of fantasy called daily fantasy sports. And this, as opposed to, because the one thing with fantasy leagues is you put the league fee in, whether it's, I mean, some leagues are collecting fees in January because they're dynasty leagues and we're starting, but the payouts you only get them at the end of December or January when the season ends after week 17. And we also don't love going week 18. So that's the last week of the regular season, but typically a lot of players aren't playing. So that's why we go 15, 16, 17 typically for the playoffs. But you only really get the payouts unless it's the weekly style. You only get those payouts in December, in January. Daily fantasy sports is a whole new concept where you're not even necessarily in a league with someone, but you can go on different websites and you can enter weekly contests that are just for that 1 week. Okay, we're just doing a slate of players on a one Sunday. You can only pick players who are playing on that one Sunday, and enter at any point during the week, and then once those game end Sunday, the payouts happen right then and there that week. So the daily fantasy sports aspect is each week you can totally draft different players, and you have a chance every week to win money. So, like in terms of the money aspect, is what kind of format you want to might tailor what the winnings look like and how often those winnings happen.
Yeah, that's great, Kyle. I think you certainly covered everything. I will throw out there to TJ and our listeners, there's also opportunities out there for just for giving back to a community, giving back to a ministry. One of my favorite leagues that I guess I'm going on my 6th league. It's a ministry that actually ministers to other groups, other pastors, and basically with that one, I mean, it's a little bit of a hefty fee, but the majority of it goes to my buddy's ministry. But like Kyle mentioned, there are weekly prizes and all that stuff, and there's a really cool end of the year prize. I mean, I won that one once, and I went to New York basically for free. Had a flight and a 3-night hotel from winning that. So that was pretty cool. Didn't have to decide where I was going to spend the money. It was already I got to pick where I wanted to go. So that was fun, but it's not just that league, but I know what Scott Fishbowl and some other things around. I mean, it's certainly a great opportunity to, give back to the community and have fun at the same time.
Well, yeah, Scott Fish is a huge proponent of that. Like, the Scott Fish Bowl, all the money raised it goes entirely to charity. So the person who wins Scott Fish Bowl, they don't win any money. Everything that's raised there will go to usually Fantasy Cares, which is Scott Fish's own creation, a charity. I can't remember. It's an official nonprofit charity too. So the tax aspects to it as well exist there. But really, regardless of what charity you go to, one thing that Scott is a huge proponent of, every league can give like whatever one entry fee's worth to charity. So again, I'll give that example: 12-team league, and it's $100 buy-in. $1,200 would be the typical prize, but if you're going to say, let's take one buy-in, let's take $100 and give it to charity, that's still $1,100 available for the people in the league to win. So that's also something that I've heard, is just if every league took one league fee per league and just gave it to charity, that would be super helpful to a lot of different causes and organizations.
Okay, let's have a scenario. Let's say you got your team, you drafted them mid-season. Let's say after the trade deadline, you want to trade your player. What's the trading process like for fantasy, and how difficult is it to trade your player for other players?
So this, again, question based on the format, right, Brad? And I think the more we've played Dynasty, the harder it is to trade and redraft, it seems, right?
Yeah.
So
yes, definitely.
So single season, really, if you're just playing conventional fantasy football, there's one purpose: score the most amount of points this year, whatever year we're in. So if you're trading away a player to someone else for one of their players, there might be for it to work, there probably has to be some type of idea that you're differing on the expectations for those players. I don't know. I'm just going to grab 2 random names. So Brad, you have Michael Pittman. I have Brandon Ayuk. Mid-season, oh man, Richardson's really heating up. Actually, this would be more sense the other way. I have Michael Pittman, you have Brandon Ayuk, and you're seeing Anthony Richardson, just everything you as a Florida fan believed in him. You're seeing it there, and you want to buy in. And in this particular league, your best chance is actually not through Richardson, but it's to get Michael Pittman. So you're willing to give me Ayuk, a player that I do believe in quite strongly.
Yes.
And with the thinking of, I'm looking for something, what would really help that is if Ayuk was outscoring Pittman, and I'm seeing those points. The other side's like, ooh, I could move Pittman to get a guy that's even outscoring him. That's great. Whereas Brad's expectation are, yes, Ayuk has outscored Pittman up to this point, but because Richardson's coming on strong, I think end of the season Pittman's actually going to outscore him. So that'll be a pretty specific example, but like one where that would have to work. Actually, typically the easiest way to redraft the trade is through different positions. Oh, this manager, their running backs are injured. They really need a running back. I'll trade one of my star receivers for one of your star running backs. And typically you might go to someone who is really deep at running back. They're almost having to make too many decisions at running back. Like, man, I'm leaving a good guy on the bench every week. Let me trade one of these away to increase my wide receiver room. So cross position trades seem to be the most common because it's each manager is accomplishing a different goal. If everyone's trying to score the same amount of points, Jamar Chase is going off. I want to go buy Jamar Chase. Well, the person who has it probably doesn't want to sell him, right? Like there's going to have to be some type of motivation on both sides to sell.
Yeah. It's definitely a supply and demand thing. I mean, that's where injuries come in handy too. I talked about my faux pas back in 97 or whatever it was, having Favre and Culpepper. If I would have, I don't think trading was that popular back then, but that would have been a good opportunity because I have a surplus of, at that time, 2 top 5 quarterbacks. I could have made up for my mistake at the draft. But
even to that, you might have to wait for someone's quarterback to get injured, and suddenly that causes the demand. And okay, now I'll go trade for yours.
And with running backs, every position. Yeah.
And then again, dynasty trading, that's a whole different aspect because suddenly there isn't just one motivation. Oh, most points this year because a team, just like we see in the NFL, teams tank. I'd say tanking in fantasy football is necessarily what I'm about to explain here, but okay, I can see my team isn't winning this year. It's okay. I'm 0-4, 0-3. Like things are, I'm one of the lowest scoring teams. Rather than try and keep pushing, let me trade away some productive players that are on the older end for draft picks. And then next year's rookie draft, I'll have more ammunition there and that'll help me rebuild the team. So in Dynasty, it's a lot easier to make trades because what you'll have happen is different motivations. I want points on one side. Well, I want picks on the other side. So it could naturally make trading partners more easily. Again, in redraft, it's tough, especially like single position for single position. I guess the Ayuk Pittman thing is a bad example because you typically don't see a lot of redraft trades that are just 2 players at the same position. It would be like Jonathan Taylor. He's having another RB1 season. Okay, maybe I'm willing to give up Puka Nacua to go get Jonathan Taylor because my star running back, whoever he was, got hurt. I really need Jonathan Taylor. Even though Puka's smashing for a second year in a row, let me go do that. Hope we traded talk enough here to give you good trade ideas, TJ.
Have either one of you made a trade recently that you regretted?
I mean, I've made tons of trades that I've regretted down the line. Sometimes you don't, and sometimes it'll take until the season to see, oh man. So one of the things I've been talking about recently is, going to rookie drafts, how I traded away 7 different first-round picks in rookie drafts across all different leagues to go get players. It's funny because Puka Nacua is involved in one where I think back, did I give up too much? Like, did I go too hard to get Puka Nacua? Because I ended up giving up Tyreek Hill and a first to go get Puka, thinking I wanted that elite young asset. But Tyreek's probably going to outscore Puka this year. So I think the 107 ended up being Bowers or Odunze. Like, I don't know that that's going to necessarily impact the lineup that much, but I might lose on points this year for that. And as much as I loved getting a Puka Nacua share, and if he continues to smash, he should hold that value long term. That's when I think back to, could I have done that differently? Did I really have to sell Tyreek? Maybe I didn't have to give up the 107. I don't know. I felt like that one I might have been able to do. Sure. I still make trades now that I think, even a couple weeks later, I don't love that as much.
Yeah. I want to say last year in a redraft league, I had I drafted Mahomes and Goff, and like several weeks I was trying to get rid of Goff, but then I was like, no, I'm going to keep Goff. He's playing well. I'm going to go ahead and trade Mahomes, and I think I ended up getting Laporta. So I had that nice little stack. I want to say there were a couple other pieces too, but really that one just kind of ended up being a wash because Mahomes kind of turned it on at the end of the year. I kept Goff. He had a couple bad weeks, but then he had a spike. So it really was kind of a wash. So I wouldn't say it was like a terrible trade, but yeah, I've definitely had my share of those for sure.
I would say the one thing everyone will make trades that they'll eventually like look at is I lost that trade. But the truth is when that happens, the best thing to do is honestly, especially in Dynasty, is to just keep trading. That's how you get your way out of that. If you try and go get it, I want to be on the 55 of the 55-45 split on a trade. If I can do that as many times as possible, then yeah, the couple times where I'm on the 45 side and I am on the losing side of the trade won't be as hurt so much because the other trades I'm successful enough at. But yeah, I've made some completely awful trades. One of the things I used to be really bad at was just giving up first too cheaply in season because like, okay, yeah, I'm going all in. This player will win. And you look at the end here, this player is not worth the first. Why did I? Just because it looked like they were doing really well. So I've gotten, I think, better at that. Especially the proof this year, how many firsts I had that I in past years would have traded during the season, but instead, okay, I'm going to hold them to the rookie draft, trade them then when the picks maybe get more value. So in Dynasty, that was one mistake I kind of commonly made too much. Even in redraft, though, is going after super flex, especially which TJ a super flex meaning a flex spot. So typically flex spots you'll see in fantasy. You can typically then in that flex spot you could play a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end. Because the truth is, the one thing we didn't explain is that the roster you draft isn't necessarily the entire team you're playing on any given week. There's going to be a certain number of starters. One kind of format I've commonly seen is, okay, you'll start 8 players, but you have another maybe 7 on your bench. So a 15 spot total. That's kind of for conventional fantasy football. You'll see 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end. And I guess that's 2 flex spots. Now a super flex is a flex spot you could play a quarterback in. So some leagues you can play 2 quarterbacks in your starting line, maybe some leagues even 3. What I've made a mistake in the past is maybe overvaluing quarterback and giving up good positional players just to go get an elite quarterback. So that's also mistakes I've made in the past.
Yeah. Okay, so you a new player. I'm a new player. I did a little research. I scouted, drafted. I played with the trading system. Now let's say we make it to a fantasy playoffs. Just give me an overview for a new experienced user. What are the fantasy playoffs and how do they operate?
Well, there are a couple different ways to go about playoffs. Now, the most common is single matchup head-to-head against another manager. Whoever scores the most points in their starting lineup that week moves on to the next round. Typically, what you'll see again, if we again take the example of 12-team leagues being the most common, the math will work out well. 6 teams make the playoffs, 6 teams don't. So half the league in the playoffs, the other half don't. So you go from 1 to 14, you eliminate half the league. And the reason 6 teams work so well is that you're also rewarding the top 2 seeds, like the NFL does the first round bye. So typically what you'll see is week 15, 3rd place will play 6th place, 4th place will play 5th place. They each play head-to-head matchups. The losers are eliminated. The winners move on to the semifinals. And then typically what you'll see is the first seed will play the lowest remaining seed. 2nd place will play the highest remaining seed. So then from there, like that's week 16, they'll play each other in the semifinals, and the 2 winning teams will play in the finals week 17. And then again, whoever scores the most points that one week will win the championship. That's again the most common format for playoffs.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Brad?
Yeah. I mean, once again, you just got to check those settings because I've been in leagues where there's it's a 12-team league and they set up 3 divisions of 4 teams, and the top in each division get to go to the playoffs, and only 1 wild card or 3 wild cards, something like that. So it really depends, and in your division it'll be just like NFL. You play those guys twice, so
Yeah, not all fantasy leagues have divisions. That's another thing. You might have one whole standing from top to bottom, 1 through 12, or there are divisions that definitely can both exist. I would say the other way I've seen playoffs perform is, and you'll typically have to have this be only 4 teams make the playoffs for this to really work. Because what you'll do is actually be an aggregate of 2 weeks, which is something we don't see so much in the NFL. That's more of a European soccer thing. But I suppose the way it would work is Okay, you go 1 through 13 in the regular season. Weeks 14 and 15 are the semifinal. So the 1 seed would play the 4 seed, and the 2 and the 3 seed would play. They'd play in week 14 head to head, but it's not done. You'd come back the next week and again play head to head, and it's the combination of those 2 weeks worth of points that would determine the winner. So that's why the 2 week aggregate. So 14, 15 is the semifinal, and then you have the finals again be 2 weeks in week theory 16 and 17. Again, you could go to 18 if you want to, but that's an official thing we're saying here. We're recommending do not play week 18. Do not play the last week of the regular season. There's too many players that won't play that game. The really good teams have clinched a playoff spot or even a first round bye. They're not playing their starters. So sometimes the best fantasy players often will not play week 18. So that's why we're really trying to drill that into people. Always the second last week of the regular season. So we really wanted to end week 17. But those are really the two main formats I've seen of playoffs, at least for smaller team leagues. Now, what you have is if you have these massive tournaments like Scott Fish Bowl with 4,000 people, typically what you'll do is you'll have cutoffs every week. That almost works more like how golf playoff works. Okay, to get to the playoffs, you have to be ranked in like the top 120. And then, okay, but then after the first week of the playoffs, you have to be within the top 75 to advance. And then and then you'll just kind of break down the field. And that could be just the points that week. It could be average of the points that week plus your season long average. Like each league will kind of determine that. But yeah, those would be the main versions of playoffs. But the first version we mentioned, week 15 quarterfinals, week 16 semifinals, week 17 the championship. That's mostly what you'll see for fantasy football playoffs.
Yep.
Now I'm gonna ask. It's gonna be a 2-part question. I'm gonna start with part 1. Now you at the end of the season, for a new user or a vet, you want to have fun experience. But because you on an online platform, have you ever been cheated out of money, or have you ever been scammed? And did you report it, or what did you do when you found out that you were cheated?
So I suppose like cheated out of money specifically would mean like essentially the way I would see it happening is you give the money to a commissioner and the commissioner at the end of the year just runs off with the money and doesn't pay. Is that what you're kind of thinking, TJ?
Yeah, something like that. You've been scammed by the website.
The website itself, no. But that's again like that's which again is why we recommend League Safe because that's a great way to ensure that your money isn't the commissioner can't take that money out. It has to be league approval. Like the whole league has to vote on it. So it's like typically, okay, these are the winners. Everyone votes on it. The winners get that money. The commissioner can't actually access, which is why again we recommend League Safe to that.
Yes.
Where you'll run into trouble with that, TJ, is if there's no website where the money is. It's like okay, everyone just pays the commissioner directly to their bank account. That's where you might have a risk of it happening. To be honest, that actually has happened to me. Now. Enough people knew the commissioner and they said I ultimately didn't report him because supposedly the people who knew the commissioner said he was like evicted from his house, like didn't have money to pay rent. He was living out of his van. I think it was $110 that I was owed for winning. I felt that might be better served to go to him. If he was really struggling that bad, I wasn't going to make a hassle of it. But it's also kind of taught me like if I don't have to play for money, I won't. But B, I want it to be through League Safe. So yes, that definitely can be a thing. That was a big thing on Twitter earlier this year. Some people in the industry, someone wasn't paying out their leagues. So they felt it was a whole scam. That caused a lot of drama in January and February, it seemed.
For sure.
So yeah, that definitely can be a thing. But again, TJ is why we officially here on the podcast recommend using League Safe as a website to have the money.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I've never had a problem with a website. I have had delays in payments because maybe the commissioner didn't get the money at the beginning of the league or something like that or whatever. But yeah, nothing major.
You know what? I've seen that where someone doesn't pay the fee and the commissioner doesn't
get on man, I'm going to go to Disney World.
No, that's happened too, where the commissioner himself or themselves doesn't have all the money because one of the members of the league didn't pay. Like I've seen that before. Yeah, nothing to do with a website being wrong. Again, like, and if you trust the commissioner, like your commissioner won't screw you over, then that's fine. Just giving them the money directly and then having them dish it out. But again, like using League Safe, I think is the best way for everyone to ensure that something like that won't happen.
Expand on Leak Safe for the new users. What is Leak Safe?
Well, so it's a website. That's the name of it, League Safe, where when a commissioner creates a league, he can create an account, and then that link can be sent out. Like when you create an account, you can also create a league, and that league link will be sent out. So everyone who's in the league, whether the platform's on Yahoo, Sleeper, if there's a spot, even if it's through email, however the commissioner contacts the rest of the league, they can send the link there, and then everyone in the league joins up on League Safe. So it functions separate from the league itself. Like whatever platform you're on, Yahoo, Sleeper, MFL, all of them can use League Safe. And so again, League Safe, just a website that the league will all connect to. You can pay the website directly. So you're not having to use the commissioner as a middleman. Like every person just has direct access to the League Safe website. They pay their fee. Fee is locked in once the league starts, and then at the end of the year, again, the commissioner will when it's time to pay out, they will start a voting process, and they will if it's first, second, third place win, they'll name this person's first, this person's second, this person's third. This is the amount they get. Everyone votes to approve. So again, no one can just take the money out without the league's approval of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if I remember right, like you get emails like when people are making the deposits into it.
Yeah.
Like
you can definitely have notifications.
So you can made a deposit league.
Yeah, if you're not the commissioner, you go on to the league, you can see who's paid and who's not. So there is a lot of transparency there too. It's not just the commissioner that's going to get that information. So.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it until maybe a couple years ago. So yeah, it's great.
Now there might be other sites that exist. I'm just not familiar with them, and I'm using LeakSafe for years. I know it works. I don't know. Not only have I never had a problem with it, I don't know that anyone has ever had a problem. Like I've never heard anyone complain that like something went wrong with the money. Again, the complaints are this person's not paying. Like a specific manager isn't paying their fee. Like that might be the only problem, but that's not the website's problem. That's the manager's problem, right? So which is back to the whole first question you asked. Knowing the group of people, having a good group of people to play with that you can trust and be sure everyone pays on time and everyone's paying attention is the most important thing. Because we can have all these great tools and websites, but if the people aren't using them properly, then it defeats the whole purpose.
And I would say part two of the question is, have your profile or someone you know profile been hacked? And what steps can lead to preventing profiles from getting hacked?
See, that's never happened to me. Like someone else logging onto my fantasy site and the team. I mean, I think that's just beyond fantasy football. That's a cybersecurity question, right? Like making sure you have good antivirus software on your computer.
Change your passwords. I don't know. I mean,
sure, yeah. Like that's more just general cybersecurity things, which we're not necessarily experts on. But I would say just make sure you have a good antivirus software that'll significantly help the risk of significantly reduce the risk of your account being hacked. But no, that's never happened to me. I think I've heard some Reddit stories or some funny Instagram or Twitter stories where an ex-girlfriend will get really mad at the guy for being such an awful boyfriend, and he'll have logged on her computer so she'll still have access and she'll go and drop her things. But someone actually hacking the account, I've never heard of that, although that's a danger that could happen, again, beyond fantasy football.
Sure.
Identity theft is a real thing. So that's where, again, make sure you've got as much good cybersecurity as possible. And, fantasy football isn't necessarily more of a risk than that than any other activity, any other social media.
So you will say for a new user just to be safe, be careful. And when it comes to, I guess, what you say, commissioners or the league, just make sure there's someone that you trust and know, and don't just hang your money to anybody because they might run off with it.
Yeah, it's definitely a risk. So,
absolutely.
Which, I mean, these are principles outside of fantasy football, right? Like we love to be open and trusting, but you also do have to be skeptical of people. The idea of stranger danger, those lines get real blurred with the internet. But there's still some prudence needs to be taken with that regard. Fantasy football is super fun, and as long as the people are doing it well with the good intentions, it makes it such a good experience. So just know what to look for, the signs of what to avoid. If you want to join a league and you recommend League Safe, well, I heard League Safe works real well, and the commissioner is just dead set against it. That might be a sign. Yeah, maybe that's not the commissioner you want to be with. So.
Good stuff.
Some side questions to ask. What's like the top for users who might know these leagues? What's the top 5 fantasy leagues to join, or top 5 leagues that you know of top of your head?
Like the websites themselves, or like the format of fantasy football?
Let's say the websites. Let's like top 5 websites. For new users, so they feel more safe and secure of playing or whatnot.
Again, I would know that any platform specifically is less secure than the others. I think it more comes down to like the experience you have, which site you're gonna have a better experience with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know that one site is more susceptible to being hacked than any of the others. Again, it's more about everyone's own personal cybersecurity. So yeah, I recommend Yahoo the most in terms of redraft because again, I think it provides a ton of data and information when you're researching the players once you're in your league. But also again, that whole concept of the free agency room, you can organize it by NFL team. I haven't seen, and you can just isolate. I just want players from this team. I haven't come across any other fantasy site that lets you do that. So that's why Yahoo to me is it's got the few extra features that really make it worth it and really make it stand above the rest. Now, my favorite site to play on is Reality Sports Online, but that's a format specific thing because my favorite way to play fantasy football is the salary cap contract. I love doing auction drafts. I love the whole idea of these players. It's not just the players, but they have the contracts attached to them. So for that, there's other ways to go about it, but Reality Sports Online is the best and easiest way that they give you all that on the site. I've been part of some contract leagues where it'll be on Sleeper, but everything contract wise has to be tracked in a spreadsheet on the side.
Right. Yeah.
MFL will allow some form of contract in the league itself. So that actually does have the capacity to have it. The one thing with my fantasy league and Reality Sports Online, so MFL and RSO, those aren't leagues you can play on for free. There is a site fee attached. So, I mean, you might also have the league fee that everyone pays in for like the money that everyone can win, but you also have to have a certain port of those league fees not going to the managers, but going to the sites themselves. But that's because those sites carry so much information. And again, that's those formats are dynasty. So like that's, you're paying the site fee, but not just for September through December in the NFL regular season. You're paying it for the whole year round to manage your dynasty team. So again, for the I would stick to just the main, someone wants to play fantasy football for the first time. I would recommend Yahoo. Sleeper is becoming so much popular, and that also, unlike some of these other sites, you could do dynasty really easily on Sleeper. So if you want to just familiarize yourself with one website that you'll be able to start with just single season leagues and eventually move to dynasty, Sleeper is the best for that. Great. I think Yahoo, again, though, is the best functioning. ESPN might be the most accessible just because everyone knows that website. Everyone probably has visited the ESPN website even if they're not playing fantasy football. So those would, I think, be the main 3. Even though Brad and I started on NFL.com, I suppose we started and realized, I would say it's an okay. There's some good things about it, but there are also some not so great things about it. The functioning of it might get a little wonky, I find.
Agreed. Yeah.
So I wouldn't recommend that one as much. And honestly, Fantrax, I used it a couple years ago. I found it worked fine, but almost no one ever uses it. And I feel like it's kind of like Yahoo in that sense. I found like not one that's very talked about, but I just think Yahoo's better. So Yahoo, Sleeper, and ESPN, I think would be the 3 main ones. But again, my official recommendation is Yahoo.
Yeah, definitely Yahoo for a first timer in my opinion, definitely.
People who love to do it on their phone, though, Sleeper's app seems to be one of the strongest, most developed. They develop that pretty strongly. So for those especially just want to do fantasy football only on their phone, Sleeper might be the preferred option. I can
Okay,
understand.
I just got one more question. I'm glad before I get to this last question that y'all gave y'all knowledge to new users like me, because I never played fantasy. I've seen a lot of my friends play it, but I never knew how the functions work, how to operate it. And I'm glad we touched on from starting out to the draft process, the redraft, the keeper league, starting off with, trading process and all. So my final question would be, and the safety of it. So my final question would be, what gives you the drive to keep playing fantasy? Like, what gives you that itch or that feeling, I say, to keep on playing?
Yeah.
I'm crazy competitive. I just want to win all the time.
Yeah.
And the thing with the NFL season, every year, yeah, the schedule is the same number of games, but each NFL season is different than the last. And trying to solve that puzzle each year, it feels like if we had all the answers, it would be less fun. So it's fun going into it where we have a process, we have all this knowledge, and then it all gets thrown out in the season anyway. And it's some people's teams look really good after the end of the season without, oh, I wouldn't have thought that team was the powerhouse, but some things change. So some people get really lucky in that regard. Other teams look amazing, and then as the season comes, oh, it's not so great. So the every process of the fantasy football season is competitive. The draft is super fun, but waivers each week can be a challenge. Even just I love setting my lineup every week.
Yeah.
I've got these players on my team, but I had to make decisions on which players to have on my team, but B, I also have to take from them and only decide a few of them to go and actually score me points and which ones I'm leaving on my bench. So the whole decision making, you get to control your team. You're the coach and the GM. You get full autonomy on this fantasy football team. And if you win, the spoils are all yours. The victory is yours and yours alone. You get to claim that championship. And again, as someone who's hyper competitive, I love winning. So I love wanting to win every league I possibly can. But the work to get to it too is also really fun. So that's what keeps me going. It's not this monotonous grind all through the year, and it's worth it at the end to win. Like every week, I have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle with that with the competitiveness, but I'll go back to something he said earlier is the social aspect, getting to know people. I mean, definitely. Kyle has introduced me to several names in the fantasy football world. Been able to have them on our show. Been able to bounce questions off them. Even the big league that I mentioned about for the ministry. Every single year, there's a huge draft party, pizza, wings, whatever, giveaways, this and that, and there's an end of the year party with the same group of dudes, and we get together and watch I want to say it's the conference finals. We'll watch that all together, drink some beers, hand out more prizes. Everybody gets the winner gets announced. The toilet bowl loser gets a trophy too. So they get to have that for a year. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes just avoiding being last place is enough of a challenge that even if you're not going to win the league, like, okay, just don't be last. Right. So competitive all the way through.
Yes.
Overall, I think that pretty. Oh, one last question. So I hear throughout the interview, y'all said something about vacations and parties. How does this is my final question? I promise. How does that work? Like, are them gifts you receive from your leagues, or are them prizes? Like, how does that work?
Well, I think Brad, for your ministry league specifically, like it's like you said, the league fee is pretty large. Enough of it's going to charity, but then the rest of it is going to a big prize for the winner, right?
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a big entry fee, but he also gets a lot of the prizes donated. For instance, there's a couple local companies here of the guys that actually are in the league. I mean, they'll donate a Yeti cooler as a prize or some fishing rods, stuff like that. So, but yeah, it really kind of just depends on the league.
Okay. I feel well, Kyle, it's your show. So,
well, I mean, one thing you mentioned, TJ, is that you said you had friends who played fantasy football. So that would be if you were interested in playing. I'd look to again your closest friends who do play and ask them like, okay, are there openings in their leagues, or if you can get enough of them together wanting to start a league. If you are needing some assistance there, you can also DM me, TJ, and anyone else listening can also DM me at Senra Says if they have any questions. I can gladly help set up if someone needs to, themselves be the commissioner in terms of how to set up a league. I can also help explain how that process works, depending on whatever website you're on. I will say it tend not to be too difficult to set up a league. It's more the getting people to join. That's the difficult finding the 10, 12 managers. So a lot of these platforms make it easy to set up and start a league. So hopefully we get a lot of new people starting and playing fantasy football. Because I know Brad and I find it so fun.
Yeah, it's the time of year to find some team members. So go for it, TJ.
Well, and TJ, you're a content creator yourself. I know you do a lot of stuff for different sports. So why don't you let the people here on this podcast know where they can find and follow you and what else you're working on?
I'm glad I forgot all about that part. Yeah, my name is TJ McKinley. You can find me on LinkedIn and YouTube and SoundCloud. And you can also follow me at Mr. TJ Savage. And I want to thank Kyle and Brad for having me on. I learned a lot from them being vet fantasy users. And yeah, I'll get the fantasy game, I guess, to try to see how it goes. But I'd like to thank y'all for having me on once again.
Yeah. Best of luck. I know we'll post our rankings pre-draft rankings, so like ranking I use for the draft, we'll post those on Full Press Coverage. We'll also do weekly rankings for the season. So anyone, check out the fullpresscoverage.com website. You can also follow our accounts on Twitter. I'm at Senra Says, Brad's at the rundown _BH. The podcast account is at FPC_fantasypod. So yeah, glad to answer all of TJ's questions and anyone else's questions who want to reach out.
Sure, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's something fresh and new. So appreciate you joining us today, TJ.
Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Brad. A great co-host as always. And of course, thank you all the listeners for listening to this episode of Full Press Fantasy Pod.